Coca-Cola Company's commitment to respect human rights goes back many decades and is fundamental to building our social license to grow, both now and into the future. And it's simply the right.
In Colombia, in the civil war in Colombia, everybody who was connected to the left or connected to liberal ideas, who tried to defend the workers' rights, the people say, that guy is dangerous, so we have to fire those guys. But sometimes they cannot fire the guy because they still in the old fashion of union, they still official workers of the company. So the only way to take them out was killing them.
El seguro lo ponemos nosotros, los uniformes los ponemos nosotros, todo lo que se gasta en la ruta lo ponemos nosotros.
Coca-Cola solo nos arrienda el camión, pero la empresa no se responsabiliza de nada.
Entonces, con esas condiciones, decidimos formar un sindicato.
You can dress it up as any way you like, but if a right-wing paramilitary murderer gets into your factory and murders one of your workers and then gets away scot-free, and your manager of that factory was seen talking to the right-wing paramilitaries prior to that, you have got a serious problem.
If one guy is killed, well, okay. Maybe the guy was involved in a romantic story with a girl and the husband come and kill him. Maybe the second one is because they own some money, but it's impossible to kill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And 11 people, all of them involved in union activities. Come on.
Mi nombre es Javier Correa. Yo soy obrero, trabajador en Coca-Cola desde el año 1983, desde el mes de septiembre. Entonces uno llega pensando en que pues, es una compañía buena, que es respetuosa de los seres humanos que laboran a su interior de las fábricas, pero en el paso de los meses se van dando cuenta de hechos que se cometen contra trabajadores.
Coke wants control over all of its operation and its workforce. One of the things labor unions do is they create kind of what we call a middle class, where people are paid a fair wage, fair benefits, have rights on the job.
There is not dangerous people. There are people who protect the rights of workers.
Where unions exist at Coca-Cola is because they've had to fight hard to maintain any contracts that they have.
Había una entrevista aquí en la embotelladora. El encargado de recursos humanos era un militar. En su escritorio ahí tenía un arma. Y las preguntas y el cuestionamiento que a uno le hacía era: ¿qué sabes vos del sindicato? ¿Te gustan los sindicatos? ¿Qué clase de lectura te gusta? Para mí en ese tiempo pues bastante intimidatoria.
El día que yo me afilié por ahí en el año 84, 1984, cuando yo salgo de la fábrica, la embotelladora de Coca-Cola, de laborar y llego a mi casa tipo 7 de la noche, dentro de mi casa estaba el gerente de relaciones industriales de ese momento. Yo a mi familia y diciéndole que yo me había puesto la otra camiseta y presionándola básicamente para que me obligaran a renunciar al sindicato.
The Isidro Hill case was just so blatant an example of the impunity that was happening in Colombia at that time.
Isidro Hill was a union leader and negotiator for the union known as Sinatra now.
Él era negociador del pliego que se le ha presentado a la embotellera de Coca-Cola en Carepa. A él lo asesinan preciso el día que la empresa debía llamar a negociar el pliego.
He was murdered at the plant in front of the other workers by the paramilitary group, the AUC.
En el momento en que él abre el portón para que saliera un camión, entran los paramilitares, lo asesinan.
There was no doubt that he was killed by the AUC because he was trying to organize a union.
They got inside the plant, not just on the premises, they got inside the plant and killed someone and left with impunity.
Como 9 tiros le hicieron, fue lo que presentó los dos.
And after he was murdered, the AUC passed out union resignation forms to all of the other workers in the bottling plant and made them sign it. So it was such a clear case of the collaboration between the bottling plant and the paramilitary group.
A guy named Leal had been tortured by paramilitaries again at the behest of the Coke bottler there.
En las horas de la noche nos queman la sede sindical.
Their offices were burnt down. It's just kind of...
A Isidro le asesinan 2-3 años después a la esposa. La llamaron a la puerta, llegaron hasta la casa, ella salió a verificar quién la necesitaba y en presencia de sus 2 hijas la asesinaron.
You feel like you could be shot anytime. You could be attacked or bomb or whatever.
He sido permanentemente perseguido. Eso es un pánico total, eso no se lo deseo a nadie. A uno lo persigue, o sea, uno entra en una zozobra donde no hay tranquilidad ni para dormir.
I met people who just didn't go out because you would get tagged by paramilitaries.
Pues en la calle uno no tiene tranquilidad porque pues uno va desprevenido de quién se acerca, quién camina mucho trayecto detrás de uno.
There are threats, there are attacks, there are people who are forced to flee, someone is murdered inside the plant, the office gets burned down, the wages are cut. The bald facts speak for themselves.
We meet up with our friend Luis Eduardo Garcia. He works for Coca-Cola, he's involved in the trade union, he delivers Coke for a living. That night, we're staying in the gated compound where he lives because they're under such threat. They need the protection. Luis Eduardo is delayed at work. So we're with his wife, his son, who the paramilitaries tried to kidnap, and his granddaughter, who's 3 years old. We decide that actually, because we're here, we offer some protection against the paras. So we pile into a car to head up to the top of the mountains to a bar up there. We leave the compound, and as the gates open, you can see the paramilitaries on the corner, but we're feeling in a great mood. We head straight up to the top of this mountain, and there, at the top, the city just opens up beneath you, and the birds hit the thermals, and this bar is just this giant concrete discus that juts out across the mountain. We get there, and the little girl who's 3 sees the space. She's never been in this much space before. She flings her arms open and charges into the middle of it, soaking up every inch of freedom and twirling with a smile upon her face. And I suddenly thought she's a target because of what her grandfather does.
Coca-Cola have that arm's length thing because they say, oh, it's not us, it's our bottlers, it's a franchisee.
They both claim to have accountability to the consumers, so they look like the good guys, but when something happens, they disown any knowledge or responsibility for what happened.
First of all, Coke has a lot of control over its bottling plant. What uniforms people wear, what their trucks look like, the product looks like, and tastes like. I mean, every Coke in the world has to taste like a Coke.
If someone found arsenic in a bottle of Coke, they would just move mountains to make sure that they got to the bottom of how the arsenic got into the bottle. They would make sure the chain was purified, it was clean, whoever was responsible was held accountable, they would help the local police investigators, etc., etc. That's what they would do.
And there was a letter that had been sent to Coca-Cola headquarters in Atlanta before the murder, in which Sinatra now said they were afraid something like that would happen because
in Colombia they are very kind. The guy who is going to kill you, they are very kind. They send you first an email, and then they send you a telegram, and then they send you a fax, and then they go and visit your house and say, we are going to kill you. Okay, so you know it. These guys know it.
So they did warn Atlanta about this, and Coke Atlanta did nothing.
Hello, my name is Marta Gloria de la Vega, and I am from Guatemala.
There was a long history of gruesome acts of violence against union leaders and family members going all the way back to the 70s in Guatemala.
Mr. Trotter was a Texan lawyer who was the owner of the franchise. He didn't want the workers to exercise any of their rights. If the workers insisted in having a union, blood will be the result, as it was.
Trabajo de mecánico industrial aquí dentro de la embotelladora. 38 años de trabajo. Es bastante amplia, ¿sí? La represión con nosotros, o sea, fue tan dura que empezó con el asesinato de los dos secretarios generales, ¿verdad?
One of the managers, he wanted a meeting not in his office or in our office, but in a parking lot. He was very clear in how would we be killed, and the first one I remember, he said Pedro Quevedo, and in fact on December the 12th they machine gun Pedro Quevedo while he was in his truck delivering the product. Later on, Manuel Lopez Balam, he took the post of Secretary General of the Union. 4 months later, April 5th, he was stabbed to death when he was delivering Coca-Cola in one of the stores. 28 times he was stabbed and died.
The union leaders were just blatantly assassinated for their efforts, and everyone was pretty certain that there would be no consequence for this in Guatemala, as we later saw in Colombia.
Coca-Cola company knew, the economic elite knew, and the military and paramilitary perpetrated these horrendous acts.
Fuimos secuestrados en un 1 de mayo de 1980, nos pusieron boca abajo, nos patearon la cabeza para que no levantáramos la cara para no reconocer a nadie.
On June 21st, 1980, one of the workers, Edgar Aldama, had been killed inside the plant.
Fue asesinado por militares, sacaron el cuerpo, lo fueron a dejar exagerado a unas 8 cuadras de aquí de las instalaciones.
So the next day, several unions, different union leaders were planning the funeral of Edgar Aldama. The police came, they blocked the streets, they pushed the door, and they kidnapped 28 workers from the different unions. They disappeared. Up until today, we don't know what happened to them.
Ultimately, some international unions complained about this. Coke went in and took that plant away from that owner.
We've used that and cited to that as a concrete example that if it really hurts Coca-Cola's bottom line, they can step in and do this.
Mi nombre es José Armando Palacios, exdirigente del Sindicato de Trabajadores en Casa, Coca-Cola en Guatemala.
It's about the best evidence we've ever had that Coca-Cola was aware, because they got directly involved in trying to negotiate with the Palacios family. He started receiving serious death threats, including visits to his home and threats against his family members.
Violentaron las puertas de mi casa, amarraron a mis hijos, a mi hija de 9 años, la amenazaron con una pistola. Mi hija comenzó a gritar y pedir auxilio y que no mataran tanto a la mamá pues como al hermano, y gritando que los hombres se fueran porque los hombres insistían en quedarse y esperarme a mí para asesinarme.
He was on the street near his home and a car drove by and fired shots at him, and instead of killing him they killed a bystander that was just standing right next to him.
Por esta razón tuve que salir al exilio.
Coca-Cola at that time had a vice president in charge of global labor rights named Ed Potter, and he sent a guy named Stan Gassick to directly try to negotiate with the Palacios family.
Me trató de sobornar ofreciéndome la negociación de $10,000 a $15,000 a cambio de que me quedara callado de todos los hechos que me sucedieron en Guatemala.
So they clearly were directly involved.
A union guy is not a revolutionary. A union guy don't make the coup d'etat. A union guy accept that I am the worker and you are the boss.
Vicente Chavez was on a parallel track, involved in union organizing activity at the Coca-Cola plant in Guatemala.
March 1st, 2008, when I was returning from a meeting in Guatemala City that I had with the General Secretary of Testimonies, the federation my union belongs to, my family was attacked. My son and my nephew were murdered. My daughter was gang raped.
It was the life of working people. All they were doing was trying to survive and exercising their right.
Coca-Cola has never admitted wrongdoing for what happened in their bottling plants in either Colombia or Guatemala, or Turkey for that matter. What Coca-Cola would admit is that the events happened.
Bir kişilik bir çevik kuvvetlerinde polis kuvvetiyle az bombaları ve silah kazandı. Genel birliklerin tahliye edildi. Şiddet kullanarak yani kapalı kolları şey yapar, sigarat şey yapar, biber gazı da şey yapar. Şiddet kullanarak cezasını.
Coca-Cola Company's commitment to respect human rights goes back many decades.
In the middle of a bottling plant, you can have paramilitaries.
We identify and address human rights impacts when they occur in our business system and in our supply chain.
Nos patearon la cabeza para que no levantáramos la cara para no reconocer a nadie.
All employees are valued and all employees are inspired.
Coca-Cola directly continued to try to negotiate with him to pay him money to be quiet and not insist upon reinstatement.
If you become aware of an infringement of the human rights policy, please reported immediately.
And there was a lot of reasons for them to know. Again, there was the letter that was sent to Coke before Citro Hill was killed.
They were part of this repression against the workers and against ourselves. We were afraid for our children's lives. And that was what basically forced us out of the country.
You had Carlos Castaño, who was the most famous paramilitary, admitted in a magazine article that he helped Coca-Cola.
Will the board, and you, Mr. Kent, continue the irresponsible policies of the Daft and Isdell administrations by flagrantly violating the company's stated codes of conduct relating to human rights and environmental justice?
Workers are free to exercise their rights to union membership, to collective bargaining.
Inside the plant and killed someone and left with impunity.
We're committed to open and inclusive workplaces.
They killed his son and they raped his daughter.
And includes issues such as freedom of association and collective bargaining.
How proud I am, all of us in the Coca-Cola company are.
28 times he was stabbed.
7.
To work for a company
8.
that actually is the world's 5th largest private employer as a system.
9.
He thought she was a target because of what her grandfather.
And then 11.
The Coca-Cola case involving Cedro Hill is a prime example of what is wrong with corporate accountability today and then as well. Nothing has changed.
I was talking with the workers in Guatemala. Just a few hours ago, they were telling me how the Coca-Cola company wants to destroy the union over and over.
Nosotros estamos muy claros de que siempre va a estar la opción de parte de ellos de quererse deshacer del sindicato y la obligación de nosotros de luchar porque eso no pase.
What Coca-Cola wants is everybody to be described as a precarious worker. Precarious worker is somebody that really has no rights.
They don't want to hire people. They want to contract people.
In order not to pay the wages that the union has.
So there is today 60% of people who work for Coca-Cola in Colombia, they don't work to Coca-Cola, they work to employee agency. So Coca-Cola doesn't have any responsibility.
When we researched Coca-Cola in 2020, I was surprised and impressed to see that it had a relationship with the International Union of Food, the IUF, but their relationship had in fact dissolved the previous year in 2019. Several long-standing issues had not been resolved.
As an excuse, the Coca-Cola company says, well, it's our franchises, it's our bottlers. But that's not an excuse that they can hide behind any longer.
The IUF, they have listed now, 2021, 5 countries where Coca-Cola is seriously violating labor and human rights. Haiti, Indonesia, Ireland, the Philippines, and the US.
In Ireland, the Coca-Cola company closed 2 of its directly owned concentrate plants. Workers risk personal setbacks if they join and promote SIP2. The Coca-Cola company management tries to intimidate and harass workers seeking to exercise their fundamental rights.
2 of these countries, Ireland and the Philippines, Coca-Cola, headquartered in Atlanta, they own these plants. They own them.
This is the company itself.
They're justifying this by saying that local legislation supersedes Coca-Cola's own human rights policy.
Wherever you go with Coca-Cola, the thing is that they will go to the lowest possible social, environmental standards they can get away with.
In the USA, the company's bottler spent more than $330,000 hiring a union-busting consultant firm.
Hoy dentro de Coca-Cola FEMSA seguimos estando amenazados de muerte, se persigue, se judicializa. Pero para nosotros no ha cambiado la política de la empresa, por el contrario. al hacerla de una manera mucho más difícil de demostrar, pues es mucho más efectiva, es mucho más directa contra el trabajador. El 21 de diciembre fue el otro hecho en Barranca contra Juan Carlos Galvis, que le ingresaron a la casa en las horas de la noche, se le llevaron una USB, un computador.
In the Philippines, they've used the force of police power, all kinds of intimidation and discipline.
The Coca-Cola bottler in Haiti, 4 of the union leadership has been dismissed. The IUF has repeatedly brought these violations to the attention of the Coca-Cola company.
Y que si la Coca-Cola quiere venderse, lo primero que tiene que hacer es tratar bien a los ciudadanos. Entonces, el día que aprenda eso, se dará cuenta que no puede hacer estas cosas. No puede venir a España y esquilmar. No puede ir a Alemania y tenerlos un año en conflicto. No puede ir a Colombia y que mueran sindicalistas. No puede ir a Sudamérica y que aparezcan los hijos de los sindicalistas y los trabajadores muertos. No puede.
I'm still not ready to say I'm done with Coca-Cola. I think about the Palacios family. I think about the Cedro Hills children. I am always trying to think of some way that I can change that dynamic and hold the company accountable, because they've not been held accountable yet.
In 2019, I met with some of the widows, and that has had a terrible impact in their lives. These widows were left without their husbands, with small children. Some of them were kicked out of the places where they were living. They couldn't pay rent.
You don't have the obligation to die because you want to keep your job. So it's totally understandable that many Colombian workers, many Coca-Cola workers, they don't want to know anything about the union because their life is in danger.
The thing about standards and rights is they have to permeate through the whole thing, or they don't exist.
When something this horrible and direct and provable happens, a person is murdered for trying to organize a union, they claim no responsibility at all. They tear up their codes of conduct and the promises made to consumers and say, we don't have any responsibility for what happens in our bottling plants, even though they all have the Coca-Cola sign over them. We need direct responsibility, and there are a number of ways to do that. I continue to use this Coca-Cola case as an example of the complete lack of true corporate accountability in the global economy.
You feel angry, you feel bad because Coca-Cola is a rich company. If you work for a company who had hard time because the business is bad, because and maybe you say, well, this guy cannot afford to pay well the people. Maybe you understand, but Coca-Cola, they make money everywhere.